Welcome to part 6 of the Angular from Scratch series, and in this video we'll be talking about data binding in Angular. There are many ways to connect template files with class files in Angular components, and any kind of binding between these two files is what's known as data binding. In this video we'll be discussing how to get a random color on a button click and how to add or bind some HTML properties to a value from the class. In this case, it's going to be the HTML property of border on a table. Okay, so we're going to disregard the fact that this is probably not the most proper way of using HTML properties on HTML5 elements. The purpose of this demo is to show how this is done in Angular, how the HTML properties are bound to classes in Angular, and we just want to have a simple example to work off of. So let's refresh our page now, and let's actually revert all the changes because I already tested that. So now this is going to be gone. So let's start from the beginning. Okay. There are three kinds of data binding in Angular: interpolation, event binding, and property binding. We've already seen interpolation right here, where we bound the value of the title variable from the class to the template. And now let's see how to bind a click event from the template to the class. So let's say we have a button, and this button has just some text, get random color, and we're binding a click event on the button. So basically, there are two kinds of click events in Angular. The first is regular JavaScript events, such as the click, and these are also known as the DOM events. There are also Angular events, such as ng submit, and Angular events begin with the ng letters. So we're binding this click event to a function that I named random colors. So now I need to define this function. So I'm going back into the class file, and right here under the title, I'm just going to say random color, give it a pair of parentheses, open and close curly or curly braces, and I'm going to say let hex equals plus math dot random, and now I need to use that fancy formula, which you can probably find in many places online. So that's it, math dot random to string. So this is now probably good. I also need to do the math floor on this, so math.floor, math.random, so this should work. And of course now I do need the closing parentheses here. So now that should be good. And now I'm just gonna console.log the value of hex. So now that I've done this, I'm going to click Save All, and this should give me a button which is rendered from the template. When I click the button, I get the value. So basically I'm bounding this click event to a function called to the random color function, and the random color function is defined right here. Okay, so that's pretty easy stuff. Now the second example that I want to show is how to do the property binding in Angular. So to bound properties in Angular, we use the square brackets, and let's see an example using the table tag. So here I have a simple table, and I've actually forgotten to add the table, the opening table tag. Let's indent this a little bit. So this is just some random data. It doesn't really matter what we have here, just some years. So let's save all and see this on the front end. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to set the border here to the value of 10. Okay, but the caveat here, or the trick here, is that I don't want this data to come from the template itself. I actually want to move the data from the class file to the template file. So I need to add something here that's going to allow this to happen. And I'm going to do the this.thickness, where the thickness is actually the variable that comes from the class component, the component's class. So I'm going to say thickness is 10. And now that I save this, it should work. So now I'm getting the value of 10, hopefully. Let's see once again if that's, so thickness is set to 10. Let's see if this is the value that I've got here. It's supposed to be, so let's just save everything one more time and see if I'm going to get that nice border around here. And it's not showing, so let me actually, oh, of course it's not showing. The reason why it's not showing is that I still need to do the square brackets. And now, using the square brackets, I'm actually binding the value of this thickness to the border attribute. So now that I save this and go save all and refresh this here automatically, the border should appear. And now when I change this value from 10 to 100, it's also going to update appropriately right here. So that also works, which is good. And now finally, what I want to do is I want to make this more dynamic so that whenever I refresh my app, the thickness value changes. So of course, I'm binding this to the hard-coded value of 100 now, but I want to bind it to a function call. So I'm going to go this.random width, and now I'm going to define the random width. And here I'm just going to say random width is return math.round math.random, and I'm going to multiply it by 100. And this should be enough to file, save all, to make this now run randomly. So when I refresh, I get a random number. So I'm basically binding the result returned from the call to the random width into the thickness variable, and then I'm just accessing this thickness variable and using the property binding with square brackets to bind the border property on the table element to the value of thickness that came from the class file. And this is the result here. Alright, so that's it for this video, and in the next one we'll discuss how to bind a property to a button click.